The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. We'll start in a few minutes just to give some people additionally some time to log on to the webinar. Thank you for your patience. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar in which we will be demonstrating a new IFRS 16 solution for OneStream. In this webinar, we'll be giving you a theoretical overview, if you like, of the solution, and thereafter we'll be showing you a live demonstration of the solution. My name is Casper van Leeuwen, and I'll be your host in this webinar today. So first of all, what do we have on offer? We built an IFRS 16 solution on OneStream, obviously, and developed that as a collaboration between a number of OneStream partners. The ambition that we have with this solution is to offer the most comprehensive and complete IFRS 16 solution for OneStream available in the market today. The solution was built by a team of experienced consultants, both experienced with building solutions into OneStream, but also consultants that have extensive experience deploying IFRS 16 at large corporations. And what we built is a solution that we offer without a recurring license fee. So in essence, what we offer clients is a perpetual, non-exclusive, non-sublicensable, and non-transferable right of use. As said, it's a partner-driven solution. At the top of the screen, you see the 4 partners currently involved in the deployment and development of the solution. It's further enhanced as a collaborative effort based on requirements voiced by clients. In the webinar today and in the demonstration, I will show you that I would say 80–90% of all the needed IFRS 16 calculation engine is available today. But obviously, with IFRS 16 being a relatively complex accounting standard, there's a roadmap that we have ahead of us. And
in the morning, when will I see you? I haven't seen you since some time.
I think this is the
That's the day everything comes together.
hold on. I think we have
Long time ago. Yeah, I'll take the coffee first then.
Alexander. Can
Don't
you
you
go
want to
on?
wait 1 hour for the new machine?
Oh, yeah. I need coffee now. Just to take the old machine first. And then
Yeah, that's what I did as well, to compare
Okay,
them.
my apologies for this little interruption, but I don't seem to be able to mute my good friend Alexander myself. And Alexander, if you're listening, I'll send him a quick chat message. Of course, all of this stuff happens. Oh, there, he's now muted. Apologies for that. It all happened. It's a live webinar, so these things can happen. But as I said, we're further developing the solution based with specific, let's say, use cases for specific industries, specific countries, specific contract needs as we go, where we're prioritizing basically the further development based on the requirements that are voiced by our clients. But as said, the bulk of the functionality is there. We have it already up and running at a number of clients, so it's used in the field, and we see very good feedback coming from the clients. Now, as said, it's a partner community-driven solution, so we're looking to further expand the, let's say, the club of partners working on this solution. Currently, we're with 4, but we're actively looking for new partners to join the team. The technical management and further development of the solution is managed by Solum Denmark. And also OneStream themselves have basically offered their support to further review, fine tune, and optimize also the code of the solution as we go. Now, if you look at the solution, in the core of the system, there's an IFRS 16 register, which is built based on the reporting compliance app of OneStream. So we've used existing technology and existing solutions from OneStream themselves to build out the IFRS 16 solution. And in the register, all the lease contracts are stored with all their lease contract characteristics. There's 2 ways to bring data into the register. One is an Excel template where you can do a mass upload of lease contracts. Typically, we use this when we initialize the solution for the first time at a client. Okay, so for example, there's let's say 500 contracts that are in use. Then those 500 contracts will be entered into the Excel template, and those would be loaded as a mass upload into the register. From there on, you can either continue to use the Excel template, but if the number of changes to the lease contract from month to month are not too big, you can also do manual data entry directly in OneStream. And I will show you this user interface shortly. Once you've entered the lease contracts into the register, you can run a contract simulation, which is basically a runtime output of how the lease contract parameters lead to an accounting schedule, showing the months of the contract and also showing then the unwind of the right of use asset, the reduction of the lease liability, and so on and so forth. Also, this one I will show you a bit later in the live demo. Now, once then all the lease contracts are agreed, you can bring them into your reporting in two different ways, either from the register directly into the queue as a journal posting triggered automatically by the solution, or if you want to route the IFRS16 journals through the general ledger, you can make an extract, which will give a CSV extract of the journal entries. This you can load into your general ledger, and from there you can unload it back into the consolidation queue. So from client to client, we see different preferences on how to route the IFRS16 data into the consolidation, either directly or via the general ledger, but both are supported. And obviously the CSV extract can be fine-tuned to the layout that you need to be able to load it easily into your GL. Now, if you look at the user interface in OneStream and you look at the lease contract parameters, there's quite a few parameters that are available in our solution. And before showing you this live in the solution, I'd like to walk you through those parameters so that you know a little bit about what you're going to see on screen. There's 4 sections in the user interface. First, there's the contract details, then there's the payment details, the contract details, and finally, there's some lease contract options. On the contract details, there's a lease ID, which is a unique identifier. This is an automatically generated unique key by the solution. Then there's some free text fields where you can enter the lease contract name as a description, if you like, and the lessor name. Okay, so these are free text fields. Then there's the entity, which is a drop-down box, and where you can select the entity that is assigned to the workflow that the user is in. And obviously, this drop-down box can be fully modifiable to fit your organization. The same goes for the asset class. You will see in the demo that there's a list of asset classes available, but obviously, this can also be made specific to your organization and to the asset classes that you utilize in your reporting. And finally, there's the contract currency. So it's also possible to enter lease contracts in foreign currencies. In the example I'm going to show you later, we have a Euro company entering a Euro contract. But if you have a Euro company that has a US dollar lease contract, then you can also enter it as such into the lease solution. Also, this is a drop-down box, and also this is fully modifiable to fit your needs. The second section is the payment details, where first of all we have the lease payments, the uniform regular lease payments. So if you have let's say a basic lease contract that has a repeating payment schedule, in this screenshot 14,500, so imagine it's each month 14,500, then you can simply enter it here. If you have a non-uniform payment schedule, so for example, you have rent-free periods in the contract, or there are already agreed upon changes in the amounts, then you can enter a non-uniform payment schedule. So a non-uniform payment schedule is fully flexible to make sure that you can fill in and provide into the solution the exact payment schedule that you have agreed with the lessor. If there are any non-lease components in the payments that should not be included in the right of use asset, you can enter them here so that they are not capitalized, but that they are directly expensed according to IFRS16 standard. Then there's the payment frequency, which is also a drop-down box. We support monthly, quarterly, half-yearly, and yearly payments. And this selection is obviously contextual to the uniform payment that I've entered in the cell above. Then there's the choice between advance and in arrears payments, which is also a drop-down box that you can select here. And then there's the annual discount rate. What you will see in the demo is that I will enter the annual discount rate directly into the contract. But if you would like to have a central table where you enter discount rates per period, per asset class, and the lease contract will, let's say, take that centrally defined annual discount rate, then that's also a possibility. Then there's a field where you can enter any upfront payments. So those are one-off payments made to the lessor at the start of the contract. And then there's any residual value that is supposed to be settled at the end of the lease contract. The third box is about contract dates. First of all, we have the first payment date. This is typically used when the first payment is different from the lease start date. The lease start date is the second box. This will trigger the capitalization of the right of use asset and the lease liability. And then there's the lease end date, which will trigger the derecognition of the contract in the solution. And typically, the right of use asset is depreciated from the lease start date until the lease end date. The fourth section is about contract options. And we have three in the solution. One is the extension options. So those are contract options that may result in a longer lease term, if obviously activated. Then there are termination options that result in a shorter lease term. Here you can also enter any penalties that you are subject to under your lease contract, and those penalties will then be also capitalized and amortized. And finally, there's purchase option. So under the old IAS 17, where you would speak of finance leases, those purchase options you can enter here. The purchase option date will trigger basically the change in economic ownership of the asset. You can also enter there a purchase amount, which is then also capitalized together with the right of use asset. And the right of use asset will be depreciated for the economic life of the asset. Also, if you enter a useful life end date into this field here. Now, deploying our solution in a OneStream application, depending obviously on the fit that you have with your lease contracts to the solution, could run typically in roughly 8 weeks. Here you see a typical timeline for the implementation of the solution, where there are 3 phases. The first phase is the preparation phase, where we understand the metadata that is typical to your organization. For example, the asset classes that you have, the entities that you have, and so on and so forth. And also we'd ask you to enter your lease contracts into the Excel load template, so we can start understanding fit to all the parameters that we have available. Then once that preparation is done, we can start loading those contracts into the solution and calculate the accounting schemas. Typically, this would lead to some, let's say, additional insights on some of the parameters being entered into the Excel load template to be incorrect. So there's some data cleansing going on. And then finally, there's reviewing and fine-tuning until you're satisfied with the outcome of the solution. Then the third phase is the rollout phase, where we typically then deliver some user trainings and where you then take the IFRS16 module into production. Now, depending on the size and complexity of the project, typically we estimate around 25 to 50 days of implementation effort, which is then a one-off cost for you, because as I said before, thereafter you're free to use the solution for as long as you like. Now let's switch to the solution to give you a live demo. I've now switched to OneStream. So I guess you're all familiar with the OneStream software. So you see on the left-hand side the workflow pane, and on the right-hand side you see our workspace. In this case, what you see is an output report, which gives us an overview of all the lease data that is existing in the register. On the navigation pane, what you see is, first of all, lease contracts grouped by entity. So in this demo application, we have 6 entities available. And now I'm looking at entity number 2624. And on the right-hand side, I see then the aggregated total of all lease contracts and their impact on the balance sheet and the income statement for this entity. So this allows me also as a user to already have a look at how my total entity balance sheet and income statement will be impacted by the IFRS 16 solutions, by the IFRS 16 calculations before bringing it into my consolidation. Below, I have all the individual lease contracts, and as you can see here in the demo application, we have quite a lot of them, and you can just select one to have a look. For example, if I take this lease contract, this is a lease contract that was starting in March. So you can see that in January and February, there's no data. In March, there's the initial recognition of the lease contract, and this then triggers the depreciation schema. This report shows year-to-date numbers, so that also explains why the depreciation is increasing year on year. But we see here then the right-of-use asset. We see the impact on the retained earnings. We see the impact on the lease liabilities broken down by current and non-current portions. And we see also the impact on the income statement, being in this example contract, a depreciation of the right-of-use asset, the lease interest expense, but also the offset of the rent expense. And the offset we use to basically as a transition account to be able to overlay this journal on your local GAAP data, where you would typically expense your lease costs, which will then be a cost. And as you can see here, this is a gain. And those rent expense according local GAAP, with on top the rent expense offset, should neutralize the local GAAP lease expense and make your P&L IFRS compliant. Now what you see here also is that we're breaking down the balance sheet accounts by flow type. So if we look at here at the lease liability, what we see on the current portion is a new lease recognition, which is in this case 8,273, which is the current portion of the newly recognized lease contract. There's a cash payment, which is a monthly payment that you can see accumulated to the end of the year. There's the interest added to this lease liability, and then there's transfers happening from the non-current portion into the current portion. Okay, so we're able also to display exactly the type of movements that have happened throughout the year. Now, if I switch to the register, you see here, let's say the heart of the engine, because this table shows then in a flat list all the lease contracts with all the parameters, which you can see in the headers, like lease ID, lease contract name, the payments, discount rates, entities, and so on and so forth. When I scroll to the right, you can see that there's quite some parameters that are available in the solution. At the top of the table, there's a number of buttons that are specific that you can see here to the lease solution. The first three are typical to the workflow. Okay, so you can calculate the lease contracts, complete the workflow, or revert the workflow if you feel that you need to make some additional modifications. If you want to create a new lease, you can click the Create Lease button here, and I'll do that shortly. If you want to edit a lease, you can do that here. Create journals that go directly into the consolidation cube can be done through this button. Export as a CSV, as explained before in the PowerPoint, can be done through this button. Run the simulation, and I will also show that shortly, can be done here. And we can also compare the register from period to period to see if there have been any changes to those lease contracts. Now, if I would take, for example, this contract here, which is a contract that has been running, because in this workflow we're in December 21. If I click on the edit lease, it will show me the user interface that I just explained in the PowerPoint, and you can see here all the configurations made for this specific lease contract. If I would then look at the asset class, for example, in this case, it's cars and special vehicles, I can just click on the drop-down box, and there I can see all the different asset classes that are included in this demo application. Now, if I would look, for example, at the payment frequency, what you can see here that it's a monthly payment, but here you see indeed the selection that I have available if I have a different payment frequency. If I would look at a different lease contract, for example, this one, and press the Edit Lease button, you can see here that there's an upfront payment of 20,700. And also in this case, there's a purchase option. And if I would then click on the show details, you can see that the purchase option is enabled. The decision date was already at the start of the lease contract. The underlying assets useful life is anticipated to be as long as 2028. And there's a purchase price that will occur at the end of the regular lease when the economic ownership is transferred from the lessor to the lessee. Okay, so these kind of additional details are applicable for the extension option, the termination option, and purchase option, and allow you to enter whatever you need to be able to create and enter these kind of specific contract details. Now, if I'm entering into a new month and I'd like to understand which leases have been added or deleted from my register, then I can simply click the compare register button, and it will give me an analysis compared to the previous month of what has changed. And what you see here in this lease contract, that compared to November, there are 2 new lease contracts added to the register, which is this one, the CLF157, and the FAIR 027. So I can look, for example, if I want to look this one up, then I can simply close this one. I go to my register. In this case, it's alphanumerical, so I find it over here. I can press the edit lease button, and then I can see that indeed this lease contract started on the 10th of December 2021. And what you see here also is that we're able to collect lease contracts that do not start only at the first day of the month, but that start basically can start at any day of the month. We can do this because we're calculating everything on a day basis, meaning that the depreciation, the interest, all the mechanics of the lease contract are made contextual by day, because it gives us the most flexibility indeed to have, let's say, a bit more, less obvious lease contracts, to have them into the solution as well. Okay, now let's enter a new lease, just to show you how that works and also show to you the simulation. So I click the create lease button. It gives me then a blank screen. Some of the fields are entered by default. What you see here is the lease ID is auto-generated. The first thing I do is that I select my entity. In this case, these are the entities that are assigned to this workflow. So I'm going to select entity 2683 and then enter a lease contract name, for example, sample lease. And I can enter a lessor name, which is then, for example, Acme Lease Company. I have a vehicle as asset class, so I go to my asset class box and I select vehicles. Contract currency is euro, so I will not touch that. I have a regular uniform payment of 5,000 euros. This I enter here, which is then a monthly payment. I'm going to pay each 5,000 euro every month at the start of the month, so I keep it as in advance, and I'm going to enter a discount rate of 2%. Then in this contract, I have the obligation to make a one-off payment to the lessor of 2,500. Sorry, in the wrong field, because it's an upfront payment, so I'm going to enter it here, which is then capitalized together with the regular lease payment in my right of use asset. The first payment date is 1st of December 2021, so I'll leave it like this. The start date is the same, and on the end date I have 30th of November 2023. So this lease contract is running for 24 months, i.e. 2 years. So when I'm happy with all these parameters, I click the save button. And then you will see in the register that the new lease contract is added here at the top of the register. So now I can select it and click the run simulation button, which will then show me the anticipated impact of this lease contract. And let me just make this one a little bit wider. What you see here now is the periods. So we created this lease contract in December 2021, and it runs for 24 months. So we see here all the periods, and we see here also the total payments. So there's a regular monthly payment of 5,000, and we had in this first month this upfront payment of 2,500, leading to a total payment of 7,500. What we see also then for every monthly payment is what is the discounted value, the net present value, if you like, for the initial capitalization of the right of use asset. And you also see the effective interest rate then of each of these monthly payments. So what we then see is the right of use asset. So the net present value of all these payments is 120,253, which is added then in the month of December to the right of use asset. And then there's a depreciation. Now the depreciation schedule is linear, but as said before, it's made contextual to the number of days in the month. And that's why you see from month to month, it might go up and down a little bit. After 24 months, at the end of the lease contract, what you see indeed is that our right of use asset is fully depreciated to zero. Then next, there's the lease liability. We see here the same capitalized amount for the initial recognition. We see here the payments happening. We see the interest being added to the lease liability, and obviously the interest is going down because our liability is going down. And then you see also here the closing value of the lease liability, which at the end of the 24th month is also fully reduced to zero. For every month, we break down the lease liability into a current portion and to a non-current portion, where you can see here that the non-current portion after 12 months is zero, because obviously the full remaining amount is current within the year, which you can see here. Now, what we also offer is the ability to offset any specific local GAAP treatment, non-IFRS treatment. For example, the prepayment that was made at the start of the contract under local GAAP would be capitalized as an accrual or a prepayment, if you like, and then linearized into the P&L to basically show the effective lease cost for the 24 months. So this periodization, what you see here, we also have in solution. So it doesn't have to do in essence with IFRS 16, but it allows you to offset not just the P&L impact of your lease expense, but also any local GAAP balance sheet impacts. Like in this example, indeed, the prepayment that should see a booking schedule like this for the 24 months of the contract. And then finally, what we see here is the P&L impact, which is, of course, our monthly depreciation, our monthly interest charge, and then the reversal of the local GAAP lease expense. Okay, with this, we can close the simulation dashboard. So we're happy with the lease contract. Last thing I wanted to show you in this demo is how the journals look like when you post it directly into the consolidation queue. So I go to my adjustment step in my workflow. There you see that a journal is created by OneStream. When I click on it, I see here at the bottom the journal with debits and credits. And what you can see that the journal is balanced for our month. And actually, when I scroll down, there's a lot of records there. But I just wanted to highlight a few mechanics here. What you see is the entity, you see the account, you see the flow. Because we're loading directly into the consolidation queue, we're loading both the closing balance values as well as the relevant flows. Okay, so obviously when you would load into your general ledger, you would only load the flows, because then the journal is put on top of the previous journals and the closing balance will be calculated. But typically to a consolidation solution like OneStream, you would load the trial balance and you would load separately the flows. That's why you see them both combined here. F99 is our closing balance flow, and the other flows are our activities for the year. In this case, no intercompanies. In the UD2, in this application, we have to break down into current and non-current. UD7 we use to separate out the IFRS adjustments typically, and then you see the debits and credits. Now, just to highlight a few there, in this contract, what you see, for example, on the F35, which is our depreciation flow, you see here the credit to the right of use assets. So the depreciation effect on our right of use assets as a credit, and a little more at the bottom, you see the debit, which is on a P&L account as our depreciation for the year. Then we see here this 10,019, which is our lease payment in this case, where the debit is obviously to the lease liability because it's a reduction of our liability, and the credit is in our P&L in this case as an offset to offset any lease expense that you recognize locally under local GAAP. Then there's our interest component, which you see here as a credit to the lease liability because it's increasing our lease liability. And the debit is a bit more at the bottom to our P&L as the interest expense for the year. And finally, this 2,500, what you see here is the reclass from non-current to current. So here you see the non-current UD2 member where there's a debit of 2,500, which is a decrease of our non-current portion. And there's a credit to the current portion because obviously we're moving from non-current to current. With that, you can follow very easily and very precisely what the solution is booking by account, broken down by current and non-current, by debits and credits, and by flow type. And with that, as said before, it becomes a very easy to use and transparent solution. That was the presentation, about 30 minutes into the webinar, leaving us 10-15 minutes to address any questions that you may have. And I believe you can enter the questions into the chat, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so you have the chat box at the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen. And there you should be able to enter messages. Let me just enter something here. No, I think it's in private. Okay, Alexander, can you, from your side, because I'm not sure if I can see any chats that are being shared by the participants. So are there any things that you... Yes?
I see a reaction from Jurgen Golf, who's had those questions. Looks really good, but that's a good compliment for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. And we're proud of the solution, by the way, and especially I deliberately put the simulation dashboard back on the screen because I think that's a very powerful component of our solution, where indeed without having to calculate all those periods in the database, you can basically run it on the fly and see immediately indeed if all the bookings that the contract will trigger are to your satisfaction. Okay, so it's a very powerful part of the solution. Any other questions that you see, Alex?
Yeah, I see my colleague Beatrice. She wants to know if you can show some reporting options.
Yes, I mean, currently what I showed at the start of the demo was the typical report where you would see the 12 months with all the journals. There are some standard reports in the solution, looking also at the current non-current breakdowns and so on and so forth. But here, typically, we would also look at the needs of the client to make it specific. But in essence, based on the data that is in, you can obviously make any report. Okay, so breakdowns by maturity, breakdowns by payments. To be honest, we haven't invested a lot of time in building a lot of reports. And again, because what we noticed is that from client to client, the questions and the needs on what to have available as standard reports can quite differ.
We have another question, and that's concerning the screens. In the last screen, I don't see the name of the columns. That one was asked by Salim, if I say that correct.
And was that in the journals or in the dashboard? Because I think, as far as I recall, but let me just get, because here we see the column.
In the previous screen, she just added.
Okay, but then I guess because when I look at, I see names everywhere. Also here, there's names, and also in the dashboard. In the simulation there's headers, but what you saw, I guess, well, there's columns here as well, I guess, right? So if you can be more specific, that will be appreciated. But I see headers everywhere so far. So
maybe in the meantime we can go to the question of Gemma and Miles. Can you do subleases where you are the lessor?
Subleasing is one of the functionalities that are on the roadmap. We haven't had the question to date so far. And I guess that's also because when you have an operating sublease, it's in essence quite simple, because from a lessor perspective, you just book the income. Only when there's a finance sublease, then you get to a more tricky situation, because in that case you have to recognize a lease asset in essence. And what we see in practice is that those finance subleases are quite rare, because basically you would contractually have to do a back-to-back contract with your sub-lessee, where you basically pass on all the risks and rewards related to the lease contract. And we, so far in our implementations, we haven't come across those, but we have them on our radar. And as you probably notice, we know how it works, but indeed it's not in the current solution. It's on the roadmap, and with the first question we get to build this in, then obviously we will develop it.
That sounds good. At the moment, I don't see any new questions coming in, or the clarification of the question we had earlier about the column.
Okay, then I'm happy to close the webinar. The few things I would like to say at the end of the webinar, you all get a follow-up email by my colleague Alex. If you would like to chat or talk more about the solution, if you have more questions, please then reach out to Alex. He will then put you in contact with the correct people, and would be very happy, obviously, to be of service to you and to implement our solution also in your OneStream platform. Alex, anything to add from your side?
No, thank you for the very good presentation of the solution. I'll send everybody the email with our data, and of course you will get the recording if you want to look back at it, or for people who didn't make it in the end. So thank you very much for your cooperation.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye.